It is 10:09 p.m. on March 15th, 2023. I'm resuming my reading of Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism by V.I. Lenin, beginning with page 18. For Europe, the time when the new capitalism definitely superseded the old can be established with fair precision. It was the beginning of the 20th century. In one of the latest compilations on the history of the formation of monopolies, we read, quote, isolated examples of capitalist monopoly could be cited from the period preceding 1860. In these could be discerned the embryo of the forms that are so common today. But all this undoubtedly represents the prehistory of the cartels. The real beginning of modern monopoly goes back at the earliest to the 60s. The first important period of development of monopoly commenced with the international industrial depression of the 70s and lasted until the beginning of the 90s. End quote. Quote, if we examine the question on a European scale, we will find that the development of free competition reached its apex in the 60s and 70s. Then it was that England completed the construction of its old-style capitalist organization. In Germany, this organization had entered into a fierce struggle with handicraft and domestic industry and had begun to create for itself its own forms of existence. End quote. Quote, the Great Revolution commenced with the crash of 1873, or rather the depression which followed it, and which, with hardly discernible interruptions in the early 80s and the unusually violent but short-lived boom of about 1889, marks 22 years of European economic history. End quote. Quote, during the short boom of 1889 to 90, the system of cartels was widely resorted to in order to take advantage of the favorable business conditions. An ill-considered policy drove prices up still more rapidly and still higher than would have been the case if there were no cartels, and nearly all these cartels perished ingloriously in the smash. Another 5-year period of bad trade and low prices followed, but a new spirit reigned in industry. The Depression was no longer regarded as something to be taken for granted. It was regarded as nothing more than a pause before another boom. The cartel movement entered its second epoch. Instead of being a transitory phenomena, the cartels became one of the foundations of economic life. They are winning one field of industry after another, primarily the raw materials industry. At the beginning of the 90s, the cartel system had already acquired in the organization of the Coke Syndicate, on the model of which the Coal Syndicate was later formed, a cartel technique which could hardly be improved. For the first time, the great boom at the close of the 19th century and the crisis of 1900 to 03 occurred entirely, in the mining and iron industries at least, under the aegis of the cartels. And while at that time it appeared to be something novel, now the general public takes it for granted that large spheres of economic life have been, as a general rule, removed from the realm of free competition. End quote. Thus, the principal stages in the history of monopolies are the following. 1. 1860 to 70, the highest stage, the apex of a development of free competition. Monopoly is in the barely discernible embryonic stage. 2. After the crisis of 1873, a lengthy period of development of cartels, but they are still the exception. They are not yet durable. They are still a transitory phenomenon. 3. The boom at the end of the 19th century and the crisis of 1900 to 03. Cartels become one of the foundations of the whole of economic life. Capitalism has been transformed into imperialism. Cartels come to an agreement on the conditions of sale, terms of payment, etc. They divide the markets among themselves. They fix the quantity of goods to be produced. They fix prices. They divide the profits among the various enterprises, etc. The number of cartels in Germany was estimated at about 250 in 1896 and at 385 in 1905, with about 12,000 firms participating. But it is generally recognized that these figures are underestimations. From the statistics of German industry for 1907 we quoted above, it is evident that even these 12,000 very big enterprises concentrate certainly more than half the steam and electric power used in the country. In the United States of America, the number of trusts in 1900 was 185 and in 1907 250. American statistics divide all industrial enterprises into these belonging to individuals, to private firms, or to corporations. The latter in 1904 comprised 23.6%, and in 1909, 25.9%, i.e., more than one-fourth of the total industrial enterprises in the country. These employed in 1904 70.6%, and in 1909, 75.6%, i.e., more than three-fourths of the total wage earners. Their output amounted at these two dates to $10,900,000,000 and to $16,300,000,000, i.e., to 73.7% and 79.0% of the total, respectively. Not infrequently, cartels and trusts concentrate in their hands 7 or 8/10 of the total output of a given branch of industry. The Rhine-Westphalian Coal Syndicate, at its foundation in 1893, concentrated 86.7% of the total coal output of the area, and in 1910 it already concentrated 95.4%. The monopoly so created assures enormous profits and leads to the formation of technical productive units of formidable magnitude. The famous Standard Oil Company in the United States was founded in 1900. Quote, "It has an authorized capital of $150 million. It issued $100 million common and $106 million preferred stock. From 1900 to 1907, the following dividends were paid on the latter: 48, 48, 45, 44, 36, 40, 40, 40% in the respective years, i.e., in all, $367 million. From 1882 to 1907, out of total net profits amounting to $889 million, $606 million were distributed in dividends, and the rest went to reserve capital." End quote. In 1907, the various works of the United States Steel Corporation employed no less than 210,180 workers and other employees. The largest enterprise in the German mining industry, the Gelsenkirchen Mining Company, Gelsenkirchener Bergwerksgesellschaft, in 1908 had a staff of 46,048 workers and office employees. End quote. In 1902, the United States Steel Corporation already produced 9 million tons of steel. Its output constituted in 1901 66.3%, and in 1908 56.1% of the total output of steel in the United States. The output of ore was 43.9% and 46.3%, respectively. The report of the American government's Commission on Trust states, quote, "The superiority over competitors is due to the magnitude of its enterprises and their excellent technical equipment. Since its inception, the Tobacco Trust has devoted all its efforts to the substitution of mechanical for manual labor on an extensive scale. With this end in view, it brought up all patents that had anything to do with the manufacture of tobacco and spent enormous sums for this purpose. Many of those patents at first proved to be of no use and had to be modified by the engineers employed by the trust. At the end of 1906, 2 subsidiary companies were formed solely to acquire patents. With the same object in view, the trust built its own foundries, machine shops, and repair shops. One of these establishments, that in Brooklyn, employs on the average 300 workers. Here, experiments are carried out on inventions concerning the manufacture of cigarettes, cheroots, snuff, tinfoil for packing boxes, etc. Here also, inventions are perfected. Quote, other trusts also employ so-called developing engineers whose business it is to devise new methods of production and to test technical improvements. The United States Steel Corporation grants big bonuses to its workers and to engineers for all inventions suitable for raising technical efficiency or for reducing cost of production. In German large-scale industry, e.g., in the chemical industry, which has developed so enormously during these last few decades, the promotion of technical improvement is organized in the same way. By 1908, the process of concentration of production had already given rise to two main groups, which, in their way, were also in the nature of monopolies. First, these groups constituted dual alliances of two pairs of big factories, each having a capital of from 20 to 21 million marks. On the one hand, the former Meister factory at Horst and the Kassel factory at Frankfurt am Main, and on the other hand, the aniline and soda factory at Ludwigshafen and the former Bayer factory at Elberfeld. Then, in 1905, one of these groups, and in 1908, the other group, each concluded an agreement with yet another big factory. The result was the formation of two triple alliances, each with a capital of from 40 to 50 million marks. And these alliances have already begun to come close to one another to reach an understanding about prices, etc. Competition becomes transformed into monopoly. The result is immense progress in the socialization of production. In particular, the process of technical invention and improvement becomes socialized. I'm going to stop here at the bottom, page 24.